Ooh.
Hey, hey.
Hello.
Oh,
Welcome everybody in the chat.
How's
Thanks
it
for waiting
going,
on us.
team?
hey everybody.
Hi.
Here we are
Exciting.
again. Very exciting.
Here, yeah, I'm
I
glad to
think we
be
have a
back.
lot to talk about
We
for
do.
Yeah.
sure.
We
And
do.
apologies in advance that I'm sick, so I'm gonna be a little weird tonight, but I'm gonna do my best. But if I sound off, that's what's going on.
Don't talk over him, Patrick. That's a little inside joke
Nobody's
from
gonna get
years ago.
that from the other podcasts we do.
Shall we
Oh man,
go? Can someone post the thing in the chat?
outline.
Yeah.
Yeah, Andy, you got that by any chance?
Uh,
Or
not
maybe I can go back to
not on the ready line. Let's
Well, we
see.
can start anyway, and then when that's ready, we'll be good because I have to do the synopsis and stuff anyway first.
oh wait,
Yeah.
I think here we go. Here we go. Found it. Found it.
Got it? Okay.
Well, I found a version of it.
I think we've been calling them different things every time. So.
I know.
And it's not letting me post in there. Oh, I did it. Okay, good.
The
Awesome.
structure is getting looser the more we do this. But you know what?
Yes,
That's fine.
but I like it.
It's
It's
great.
Me too.
Okay.
And I'll tell you what, if anybody in the comments right now before we start has suggestions for the lore section, um, I will very gladly read that and give you credit for it. In terms of like things that this episode has to say about the lore of Alien, the world building of Alien, etc. I'm kind of racking my brain. I don't really know.
Don't forget after three is I like griping, and then which is four, and then five is lore.
Yeah. I got
That's
some
not
lore. Got some lore for you, Patrick.
all right.
Oh,
All right,
okay.
D Brocellis.
That's what they call me now.
All right, ready?
Yeah.
Welcome to Unearthed, an Alien Earth after show brought to you by Perfect Organism, the Alien Saga podcast. I am your host, Jaime Prater, and I'm joined by my co-hosts.
Patrick Green.
Harry Chicos.
and Andy Geek Girl.
And we are here today to talk about episode 5 of Alien Earth, which is what is it? What is the title? In
In
Space,
space,
No One.
no one.
Episode 5, and I'm going to hand it off to Patrick for the rundown.
In space, no one. It feels like there's something missing. All right, so the synopsis for this one, we start off with a cue that it's going to be 17 days from Earth. Morrow is woken up by Clem, and he's brought to Chibuzo and Rahim, who are standing over the dead captain, with Severi now the acting captain. Bronsky still has a facehugger attached to him. Schmel and Malachite, the I wrote down the idiot, tell Morrow that the ship's propulsion system is broken. Those are the two engineers. Morrow believes that the saboteur is on board. He confronts Severi about her relationship with Bronsky. Severi explains the situation to Mother. Mother says the specimens are the priority. We get some of Morrow's backstory that he had a daughter that he left behind, and she died in a house fire at 19 after he'd already left. Bronsky's burster gets out. Chibuzo is studying ticks. A tick opens the top that she hadn't secured properly, and the midge is watching this all happen. He distracts. It distracts Chibuzo while the tick deposits the juveniles in her water bottle. The midge escapes. Malachite drinks from the bottle, of course. Uh, let's see. Morrow finds that there's a call log between Boy Cavalier and Petrovich, who's another person who's been on the ship apparently. Figures out that Petrovich is a saboteur. Rahim and Chibuzo decide to remove the baby ticks via surgery. Tang is taken by the Xeno. The baby ticks fart out some death gas, and Rahim and Chibuzo die. Petrovich attacks Morrow and Clem. Clem dies. Morrow kills Petrovich. Severi runs from the Xeno. Shmuel has the Midge, and the Midge and the Xeno duke it out with a Royal Rumble at the end. We see the events from the first episode now, starting with Severi dying and Morrow sealing himself in the mother room. And we end with Morrow meeting the granddaughter of Yutani, and we have the Smashing Pumpkins with Cherub Rock. Classic track by Smashing Pumpkins. The first concert I ever went to was a Smashing Pumpkins concert. A little bit of trivia. And that's
Love
how'd I
that.
do? Miss
Nice,
anything?
Patrick.
Awesome. Fabulous. I have to say, when you were spitting out some of those names, it just kind of sounded like phlegm and schmem and like it was
Yeah.
a lot to handle, a lot of like awkward names, which leads me to immediate reactions. And I think in this episode specifically, the reaction, at least in our chat as we were watching it, we had some pretty strong ones here. For me, uh, the overall vibe I got was just inconsistency and kind of like stupidity. And I don't mean that in like the way it was written or what's going on. It's just we're getting characters again that sometimes do things that just don't make sense to me in this world, right? In this universe. And not in a way where it was like the saboteur or they made a mistake. It's just some things I found myself scratching my head as I was watching. There were parts that really creeped me out and I was scared. So I enjoyed that aspect of it. But overall, I had this vibe that it was just very inconsistent, especially in the beginning. I wasn't identifying with how these characters were reacting to a lot of things. And I want to definitely dive into that as we go on. What about you guys?
Yeah, I really enjoyed. I think it was Jamie. You said it was shot very beautifully in our chat, and I do really enjoy a lot of the environmental, the way the camera is set up to make us feel certain things. I really enjoyed that aspect of it. I also really enjoyed the subtle callbacks to the other films through a lot of the camera angles and the way certain sets were lit. Patrick, to your point, the idiot and the other engineer, who I actually enjoy a lot. I enjoy his little like spitting tobacco can. But I enjoyed that shot where the wall is lit up and you get that Parker um and Lambert sort of feel. I really thought like the Xeno or something was going to happen to them in that way, in that shot. And when the chain slowly slides down, I was like, oh no, what is that? Who's doing that? So I really enjoyed a lot of that and a lot of those wide shots and slow zooms in like down the corridor and yeah, just the feeling you got. You definitely felt like you were on the ship, and that's what I really, really enjoyed right off the bat from this episode.
I'll go. Patrick will be a little more Patrick will be more measured than I am. By the way, welcome back, Perry. We didn't Perry was gone last week, so we're happy to have you
Oh,
back.
yeah,
Thank
welcome
It's not
back.
the
you,
same
thank
without
you.
you. First impressions. I'll echo what Perry said and what I said earlier. Beautifully shot, gorgeous, just gorgeously shot. Like it felt fairly authentic. Unfortunately for me, this is the worst episode that I've seen. Um, a lot of it pulled me right out. A lot of it didn't make any sense. For me, there was no chemistry between most of those actors, except for Morrow, who I just love. He eats up the screen. Morrow kept me watching it for sure. Um, yeah, sorry, people. This isn't gonna be me gushing about how much I'm enjoying the show because this episode derailed me, honestly, when I saw it like a couple weeks ago, however long ago it was. Patrick, feels like it was a year ago now. Um, yeah, a lot of inconsistencies to Andy's point. Just things that don't make sense, things that I just felt overwritten. It felt overwrought. It felt overly complicated. I didn't know what was happening. I think Alien works best in mystery, and I think what happened on the Maginot ship should have been left to mystery mostly, with the exception to the flashback, and I'll end it there.
Yeah, I just quick shout out to everybody in the chat. We have 15 at last count. I think it's gone up since then. So hey everybody, we see lots of awesome comments. We're going to try to get some of them in here. And a special shout out to our beloved Ross Dead Dark, who is a member of the team, obviously, but who's also in the chat right now, who's getting married in like a matter of hours. So you need to go to bed because you have a big day tomorrow, but that's
Yeah,
okay.
Ross.
Because we're really, really proud and happy for you, man. And we love you and we're really excited for you. Okay, anyway, going back to the show for a second. Um, the attention to detail and the sets are incredible in this. There's elements of this episode that I kind of enjoy a little bit. I like that it is a very different vibe from the rest of the show. It's kind of a little bit of a palate cleanser in a way. not in a good way, but it kind of changes it's a nice break somewhat from Neverland. And I got to say, going back to Neverland after this episode feels great. I will say that to me, this is really weighed down by these characters who, to Andy's point, behave incomprehensibly. I mean, I've now seen this 4 times. I did watch it again tonight. I said I wasn't going to, but I did. And I have to say, from the very beginning, when the captain has died, and it seems like somebody just screwed up their lunch order or something, like the urgency is completely lacking. And then Morrow, who gets rushed out, and then so Clem goes and gets Morrow, and then they're just like talking about how like Clem's trying to get him to talk about how hot somebody is, and then they like go, and the captain's face is melted off, and everybody is treating it like that's awkward. I'm like, what? And then Zaveri goes like, Morrow, like, you don't have any pants on. And I'm like, because the captain died just now when we have a parasite loose on the ship and he was woken out of cryosleep. And like that's the thing. In addition to that, well, I'm at my time. But we'll get to it. We'll get to it.
I say, yeah, no. There's just, yeah, and for me, the captain, the assuming captain, she pulled me out of it. I think I don't know what was going on there, but I, yeah, I'll leave it there.
Yeah, we can definitely dive a little bit deeper here in our next segment. So let's do a little company debrief. And yeah, let's go in depth a little bit, Morrow's story arc. That was awesome. I loved what we got to see with him. And we can talk a little bit character development and some of the thematic elements. So Jamie, you can talk about the assuming captain on the ship, all you'd like here. But yeah, I mean, I can sort of kick this off here. I hear you guys on what you're saying. I think just possibly the actors were maybe I don't know how much of like how much they believed it the characters themselves like in this setting. Like I feel like when you're watching Alien, there's no guessing at like what they're doing or their jobs on the ship and things like that. And I'm still trying to figure out if who Tang is like. Is he synthetic or something like that? I'm feeling like there has to be some sort of element like that on the ship here, and uh, yeah, I guess I just really, sorry, this sounds like all over the place, but there's just so much going on, like with the aliens, with all the different organisms. I loved that the tick like laid baby ticks in the water. That was really, really cool. I really enjoyed that. And then the toxic farting gas that comes out when they're trying to remove them was just really cool. And I really liked that they're adding, like outside of this episode, I like what Hawley is adding as far as the creature, the biology that's coming into the alien universe. And that to me like really excites me. And I'm hoping obviously that that's built upon in further seasons because I feel like we're just hitting like the tip of the iceberg there. And so that to me was just really enjoyable. But Andie, what do you think?
So, I love the biological elements. I always do. I think every time we experience a new, and we can kind of save that for lore too, but um, I love all of the discovery of, what their defense mechanism is, what's their motive, if you will. The Darwin aspect of this, I love. Um, the Going back to Patrick. And in my notes, I wrote one of the first things Mara says is incompetence or sabotage. And I was like, incompetence. Because as people who, first of all, if you're going on a 65-year long mission, right? The fact that very few of these people know what's going on. Like, why would you sign up for something if you were not 100% debriefed on every possible protocol and thing that you can encounter? They seem to have a lack of knowledge just in general about what the stakes are, what the protocols are. The lack of concern for safety, the measures, like, oh, the green light's on, the red light. Like, I would never enter that room without 5 things between me and any of those species and every protocol checklist checked off. That to me, just as like a science teacher, bothers me every time I see that, especially something that's so expensive and so fraught with danger and so long, and something that where the stakes are so high. Um, However, having said that, I do enjoy that the stakes keep getting raised in terms of the danger, the new things that we see. I just wish it was done in a way where I bought it more, where I felt I was there. I felt like it was like you were saying, there was like this lack of chemistry and synchronicity between what was going on and what we were seeing and their reactions. To me, it was all about their reactions or lack thereof that didn't sell it. There's, I would have been absolutely dead. Like we should have had a Lambert screaming their head off that they were going to die because you had the captain dead, you had these horrible things running around, and then you have the engineer saying, we're basically a missile and we're all going to crash. And no one seemed to care. And for me as an audience member, then it's like, I don't care. I don't have that sense of urgency if they don't. Um, I guess that's more of gripe. I'm sorry. But that to me was like the major thing in terms of character. I wish we had a greater sense of who they were because we kind of had them in the beginning of the first episode and then we had a full hour with them here. And I still don't have a sense of who many of these people are. I wish we had more.
Yeah, I think a great example of like an issue with this episode is the character of Chibuzo, who's played by Karen Aldridge, who's an amazing actor. She was in Severance. This last season was incredible in that, and she's very capable. Like, she does a really great job with the scripts that she has, but her character is written so ineptly that it almost boggles the mind. So this is a scientist, right? She's a science officer who eats food inches away from parasitic organisms that they have traveled across, galaxies to procure, and then doesn't remember to put the top back on the container and like gets defensive when someone calls her out on it. And I'm like, for one thing, a scientist would never do that. Like, you would follow protocol. You wouldn't be eating lunch next to an actual, dangerous specimen like that. You would also be following protocol in terms of putting the top back on the lid, and you would have gloves on. You would have like ventilation going. There would be all of these things. These are foreign parasites from other planets. It's very lackadaisical. And to your point, like when she is summoned, and the red light is on, somebody would notice that. I mean, think about it. Like, she also in that same exact sequence forgets to put the freaking images case back in the right place. So then that falls off too. And I'm like, this one character who's played by this very intelligent, like actor who has a lot going on behind her eyes, and she's really captivating, like, is making all these dumb decisions like back to back to back to back to back. And it's really frustrating because it feels like the pieces of such an amazing episode are in this. I mean, the set, the costumes, like the
Yes.
the creature effects. There's so much really interesting stuff, but for whatever reason, it does not come together into any kind of a cohesive whole. And we're left with the same problem. I'm checking my time that we have. Oh, I forgot to start it. So I'm just going to say I have 20 seconds left. We're left with the same problem that we're left with Prometheus, which is we just have these people who behave nothing like scientists or like professionals of any kind. I mean, we have another data, dump about five companies being in control of everything in this episode, and I'm like, how would these characters not know that at this point? So yeah, there's definitely some whining to go, but I do want to say a good thing that somebody in our chat pointed out. This is John Dornbus, says it's very fun dropping into an alien movie halfway through waking up with a crewman, because we don't need any more what's in the egg moments, just like Spider-Man doesn't need any more Uncle Ben's to die on screen. I agree with that. I think actually as a narrative device, starting in medias res like that is really cool, and I think handled differently could have been great. I mean, to Jamie's point, and the points other people are making, when Morrow's on the screen, it is like I'm like totally engaged, and him waking up and being summoned and like being confused, I'm like, let's go, let's go, let's go, and then instantly it goes into this whole like, oh, the captain died. I guess we should smoke a cigarette over his dead body. Issues.
Yeah, this is a tough one for me. To In terms of like themes and to Patrick's point, I love that we are thrust into this mid crisis. I do love that. Um, I have a hard time with Malachite, who can't say the word apprentice he gets on, who hired this guy? Why do you have this guy with a very low IQ, obviously fixing your fucking ship? Why is this guy even employed in this company? It doesn't make any sense. And I just don't understand. Um, and this is the most passionate you guys will see me and hear me talk about this show in a more critical way, because I've really enjoyed the rest of it, as you very well know. I mean, I have my gripes here and there, but um, there's this issue that the Alien series has been saddled with since Alien Resurrection. That is ridiculous characters and stupidity. And it brought over in Prometheus, it happened in Covenant. Um, I think Romulus was a pause on that. I don't think that they were dumb characters at all. I just don't think they were fully realized. I think they were comparatively, like the Romulus characters to the characters in episode 5 of this show are brilliant. And I just don't understand the disconnect here, why these characters are just so bad. But to Patrick's point and other points, I think these actors are phenomenal. I think these are great people. And I also know that these actors were together for 3 weeks before they started shooting this. So I'm trying to understand why they didn't have any chemistry and why this felt just completely dumbed down for the audience. Um, yeah, I'm fired up about this, and I'm fired up about this because I want this show to maintain the level of, like, you get to Neverland and Earth, and you have these rich, full, well-developed characters, and then you get to the Maginot, and everything falls apart. And I want to know what happened. I don't know, and yeah, so I'm going to end it there.
Can I just add a couple things? First off, I want to say hi to my sister Lauren and her husband Dylan. They're watching right now and they've been very invested in the show. I just saw them over the weekend.
Hey, Lauren and
And
Dylan.
thanks, you guys. And it's just great to be able to be watching a show like this with some members of my family. And they've known me as a closeted Alien franchise nerd since I was a kid. And so being able to enjoy it and talk to them has been amazing. But cutting in back to this, I just want to say I know a lot of people in our chat are really, agreeing with you, Jamie, talking about how Morrow is really like the anchor of this episode as far as a character goes. And I just love that we get to see so much more of his background. Like I was really, really like pulling at my heartstrings when he's reading his daughter's letters. He's smoking that cigar, but he's just like he's crying. He's in like this state of like contemplation, right? Like, why did I go on this mission? Why did I do this? And what's the end goal for me here to come back and my family's not even going to be there anymore, which drives his character more, right? And so to your point, Jamie, I think, and Andie too, like the inconsistencies you guys are talking about, it's very inconsistent to see Morrow be such a strong character as a crewman of this ship, knowing what he's doing, having so much intelligence around everything, really, and to see everybody else just completely 180 on the other side of that. And I wanted to read a comment from Dylan Smith, which I think brings up a really good point, is maybe it's intentional how insufferable and illogical this crew is. Makes me think of the marketing cycle and how Hawley kept saying, well, just wait, just wait. Does humanity deserve to continue on? Right? It's sort of like this underlying theme, I think that Hawley was trying to write into the show. And I think to also it's sort of like art gives us this looking glass into the present day and maybe what's going on in the world today. I think it's a little bit, or could be seen as a little bit of that. And so, not trying to knock the writing and the characters fully down a peg, but I just think there could be some symbolism there to present day and what we're dealing with in our own lives. So I don't know. Take that with a grain of salt, but I just wanted to add that.
So, well, the next section is I like griping, but that's that's what we've been doing. That's sort of what we've been doing. I mean, I don't like to um I don't like to make like comments that are critical. Like I don't like to like categorize them as griping. I think that these are really well thought critiques of what's not working in this show. I don't like binary. I don't like sort of good or bad. I think things can be in between. Our whole world is like a series of colors and grays and some black and white here and there. Um, so with that said, we shall start and embark on our I like griping section. Um, I'll just finish, we'll get into this. Patrick and I are recording a standalone episode in place of our roundtable, and then we're going to do a big, huge roundtable at the end of the season. But again, for me, like someone said, or I think Julian D'Souza said in the chat that it was a fun watch, and I said it just wasn't a fun watch for me. I was really angry, and I had to talk with Patrick. He had sort of talked me down because I was like done. I was like, I can't do this show anymore. Like I was really at that point. And then we talked through it and talked through it over the course of the next couple of days. And Patrick was really doing a fantastic job of like walking me back off the plank because I just was really cataclysmically disappointed in this episode that it could be um it is what it is. And I think to your point, Perry, in terms of I understand what you're trying to say, like what Noah Hawley's trying to do, like, are we worth existing further in the future? I get that. But in the setup where you have this billion-dollar space mission to these other planets to get these things, don't you have the best of the best people there? Aren't these people, these are smart scientists, these people follow protocol, they follow the data. I mean, these are data-driven, and these people seem like they didn't know what the fuck they were doing. And then Tang, you didn't know if he was what was Tang doing? Like what was even that except for just acting weird for no real reason, just oh, we need a weird character on this episode. And I'm not saying this. I also realize too, pulling back a little bit, how much effort this show, but shows in general take to make, especially this show, just because of the writer strike, and they were like off work for what, 3 or 4 months, something like that, maybe a little bit longer than that, maybe a little shorter, I'm not sure. And all of the time that people have spent to create the show, and the actors who were away from their families, and everyone involved in the show, the people in Thailand who worked really hard. So I want to make sure that I'm very much appreciating and acknowledging how much work went into the show. And I know what it's like to have to work on something for a long time and have someone just dismiss it. Say, no, it's fuck that. I don't want to fall into that. But at the same time, like we are here to give our opinion. And I am very critical of this. I think this is one of the worst entries in the Alien series. I think it's on par with Prometheus in terms of characters. But I do still love the world. Like even rewatching it today, and I was fast forwarding through it during my rewatch because that's all I could do. I just was like, oh wow, this episode's actually more beautiful than I thought. It was just gorgeous shot, just stunning. They really conjure Ridley Scott's aesthetic in some ways more than I saw in Romulus. Like Romulus did it really well, but they just Hawley and his crew, they just did really a fantastic job. I just wish the script hadn't been dumbed down. That's all.
Yeah, I want to add to the comment, Perry, that you said about does humanity deserve to live? That might be what they're trying to convey here in terms of lack of empathy. Like we were saying, none of them really seem all that concerned with certain crew members dying. It seemed like they didn't like the captain. So in that regard, if that's what they're trying to convey, like everyone's just out for themselves and no one's really caring, then I think that's a comment that they made pretty well. It didn't come through necessarily for me because at the heart of that, people will also be looking out for themselves. And so when you couple that with people not doing the things that are in their best interest for their own safety, then it doesn't kind of sell that point for me. That's just what I would say. But it did come out like there was a lack of empathy. There was a lot of just discussing, like you were saying, pants, smoking. Oh, you're going to eat that. And people died in brutal ways in front of their face. There should be some concern for your own safety that these things are loose or that this could potentially happen to you. The alien crew, the aliens, most movies beyond that, there was terror for what they saw, even in Covenant, right? That scene in the beginning is horrific. They are truly terrified. And none of that was sold to me in this. And that to me is like my biggest gripe is if you're not terrified, then I'm not terrified. Um, I did like the image kind of tapping on the glass to let her know something. I was like, what's going on there? Is like, does the image want in on the action and is trying to tell him, like, I don't want you to get her, I want to get her? Is that what's happening? I did like that. I was very intrigued by that. Like I said, I think the creatures were my favorite in this part. One other gripe I do have, the speed at which Zaveri outruns that Xeno in the
So ridiculous.
there is no way. It took all reality away. There is no realism in that moment whatsoever. It is like literally on her, and then she's like down the hall. That to me, I was like, what am I watching here? It was like she was at morph speed or something. Um, I I do have a problem when it takes you so far out of realism that you feel like you're not part of this, like you're not in it. And I know this is a show about aliens and I know it's not realistic, but it's grounded in realism and that's why we're talking about it. You have to maintain that the characters and their actions and physics has to exist in this world. That's my major gripe. I did love the Smashing Pumpkins at the end though, I have to say.
Yeah, I can I can definitely agree with you guys on a lot of this. I the episode as a whole I did really enjoy. I think a couple of my gripes to Jamie and to Andie, to your point, the characters aside from Morrow being so dumbed down, I'll just say, does make like when you're looking at Alien, right? And you're thinking about wouldn't, Weyland-Yutani in a ship like this hire the best people possible? It would make the severity and the intenseness of the creatures outsmarting them way more intense and way more horrifying. There definitely is a part, or there's like a turning point in this episode where you're like, okay, yeah, they're all, or the image is going to break out, the ticks are, something's going to happen, and then Patrick, to your point, eating around in um the lab is really not logical, and so their demise isn't a surprise to anybody, or it's just not that scary. And so Holden, I know in our chat said it works really well as like a television storytelling, which I agree a little bit to. And Jamie, so you're shaking your head, and just in the way that we're calling back to this point in time to see what happened on the ship is really cool. Like I said, I did really enjoy a lot of the camera shots. The only other thing, or one of the other things that was a big gripe for me was the guy in the suit with the xenomorph. Like, I didn't really appreciate the slow tail trip. Like, I don't know if they were calling back to Alien with that. And Zavari is running away, but I'm just like, wouldn't she would have died there in that moment, if this was any of the other films. And I feel like there was a lot of like Alien 3, obviously, like running down the corridors, which was cool. I loved all those shots. But then there were points where it was broken up, where it was almost too much a guy in a suit moving around, and I could tell the suit actor was trying to act very xenomorph like in certain shots. Like I was almost like looking for that. And it just took me out of it a little bit. I'm just like, oh, this is clearly a person. It's not the Xeno, where I feel like is watching all the other films, the original four, I never felt that way, really, watching the Xenomorph itself. And they showed too much of it. I just like, as much as we know it's a Xenomorph, like keep that thing in the dark. Make the kills and everything be so much in the dark that half of it's left to our imagination to figure out like what actually happened. Like, did they get disemboweled by the tail or something like that? Like I really, really lo love that. Like even in Alien 3, you get so much running down the corridor, but it's from the point of view of the Xeno. And of course, I know there were limitations with the suit and how they were shooting it, but it's just like keep those limitations, you know? That's what made it so scary in the original films, and I just that's what I loved about them. And so there were bits and pieces of that took me out, but overall, I enjoyed it. It was a fun ride for sure. Patrick.
Yeah, I think so. Something that I love about Noah Hawley is his characters are very rarely one dimensional, and they're very frequently surprising. And what bothers me so much about this episode is it's really the opposite. I mean, I think Morrow even is kind of written one-dimensionally in this episode, but because his performance is so great, we don't even really notice it. But I think for the rest of them, that's kind of the problem, is that the performances are not elevating the script, which is actually really kind of bad. Um, there's people in the chat like Mario talking about how, if this crew was smart enough to get them in cages, I guess they should have been more cautious on containing them. And then Xeno Nick says, well, maybe the best ones died during the retrieval of the specimens. Hey, that's possible. We don't, maybe we do know that they lost a lot of good people. So, but I don't think so. And to Andy's point, so I'm in a lot of science classes at the moment. You never eat anything in a lab where any experiments of any kind are taking place. I mean, we're not allowed to have water bottles anywhere near it. Like leave them in the hallway, and that's just for looking at slides on a microscope. I mean, you think having this virulent parasite people are going to be eating next to it? I mean, it just really boggles the mind. I'm like, nobody pointed that out. I mean, a great example of that also is when Raheem is operating quote unquote on Malachite, and it's like the least sanitary, like least controlled, least thoughtful surgical procedure ever. I mean, he's just ripping it off the guy's freaking pericardium with a cigarette, and barely put gloves on, let alone a mask or anything. I mean, it's really, and then you look at Alien, and you have characters in the med lab, fully suited up with, protective gear on, and it's just like, why didn't they think to do that? Like, why does Raheem act so completely different from any physician of any kind that I've ever interacted with? It's like he has no concern for the actual livelihood of any of these people who he's supposedly sworn to protect. And just going back to the one-dimensional characters thing, I mean, Malachite is a great example of this. I think that actor is actually very charming and funny, and I could see him being great in other things. But in this, he really, like, he exists only to be stupid. I mean, the number of just one-line stupid jokes that he has is ridiculous. Like, he doesn't know what an apprentice is, doesn't know what a saboteur is. He laughs because she says duty. He doesn't know, he's eating during the meeting and then makes a joke about it. It's like all he does is just constantly be like, what's the government of this world like? Well, how does this work? What's this? Where am I going? And to Jamie's point, like, this is a guy who's fixing a ship that's protecting the lives of like a lot of people. And that's the extent of his intellect. And Tang, I think, is another great example of this. Tang is so funny because I think I don't think, I know we all thought he was synthetic in the first episode. And then there was gradually over the next week or so, Christian was the first person who pointed this out to me. Christian was like, he is asking about getting shares, so maybe he's not. And then you go back and you watch and you're like, oh no, he's not synthetic. He's just acting completely different to any human being that's ever existed. And this is a character who just exists purely to be creepy. I mean, the entire scope of this one character is just creep. Left bound, right bound, creep. That's all he does. And it's really tiresome, like every interaction that he has, he just does it in the grossest possible way, the most like lascivious, gross, just like licking his chops. Like he's just disgusting. Like, why would that person be on this crew? Like, why would they have hired somebody like that? And again, and then the people who kind of transcend that, people like Morrow and like Shmuel, the lead engineer, who I think is really fantastic. They are people who are like kind of working overtime to add interesting choices to their characters so that they feel more lived in. And what blows my mind though is that Noah Hawley wrote and directed this. Like, this guy who I am an enormous fan of, and I think has been doing a great job with the rest of the show and with basically everything else that I've ever seen him do. This was like his baby, and it really came out off. And I think, my kind of final point on this is I think it's a good window into who Noah Hawley is creatively when it comes to television, which is I think he's incredible at understanding and adapting core thematic ideas and principles for new stories. And I don't think he's very good at just creating sequels to things or creating things that feel kind of comfortable, things that we kind of know. And I think this is a really good example of that. It's like it wasn't playing off of his core creative strengths. And maybe he had a lot of kind of I mean, sorry to keep going, but my timer's not running this time. I think this is an episode that feels like he was kind of surrounded by not necessarily yes men, but by people who were really excited to recreate Alien. Like they got to build this set in Thailand. They got to do all this amazing stuff with the costumes and the monster stunts. And I think everybody got really excited about making this thing that ended up basically becoming just an incredibly well-produced fan film. And that's why it feels like that, because that's kind of what it is. It's like this was their chance. The rest of the show is very much exploring new stuff, new characters, new types of storytelling in Alien. And then this was one where it was very much, this is just what Alien historically is, so let's just do that. And I think everybody was just so excited to make a really cool Alien movie that that's kind of all they focused on instead of actually telling a really good story. And it's a shame because you go back to Neverland and the characters are so varied and they're so not monochromatic at all. I mean, none of those characters are. Even a character like Adam Mines, who's got barely any screen time, he's intriguing and confusing, and you can't take your eyes off of him. Whereas on the Maginot, these characters just really feel like paper to me.
I'd like to add one more thing, something that Perry alluded to, like with the Xeno. There was a couple of moments where the XX-121 is in the hallway, almost looking like it's doing interpretive dance. I'm like, what are you guys doing with this thing? What is this thing doing? Have you not watched the other films? And I think, Patrick, you mentioned Alien, and Alien is a film with space truckers. We all know this. It's been established. We've talked about this for many years now. It's one of the things that we love about it. Those people in Alien should not seem smarter than the people in on the CSS Maginot or whatever. But they are. The crew in Alien, if you would have brought Parker aboard the Maginot with what's going on, he'd be like, how the fuck did you guys get here? Who's running this ship? This is a circus. Those people in Alien they seem more like scientists and professionals than the people on the Maginot, and I don't understand that. And it's eating me up, but I will never talk about this episode again after this after show and maybe whatever show Patrick and I do. But just because I've been experiencing so much joy with this show, and this episode just was such a struggle. But yeah, and I also think that it would have been best to leave this up to imagination and flashes, the quick flashes that we saw. Alien works best in mystery, and we just didn't. And they unveiled it, and what they unveiled ended up not being better than what they were showing us before. So onward.
I do want to, before we move on, just read something, a really cool comment in the chat that Dylan Smith left, which is about the Smashing Pumpkins. So Dylan says, the Cherub Rock lyrics work great. It's a song about selling out. The crew was sold out, and now Morrow is selling out. And the chorus of the song ends with Let Me Out, which describes the aliens. And I agree with that. I think that was a really cool song. I love Cherub Rock. It's a great song. And I like the placement there at the end. And again, my favorite part of that song coming at the end is that I know we're going right back to Neverland, and I'm really happy to start the next episode. So why don't we move on to our final section, which is the alien lore and world building. And I know Perry's got some stuff that he wants to say about that. Let's hand it off to Perry, and I'll check the chat, see if anybody's got any other ideas for that.
Oh, geez. All right. Um, Yeah, world building. So I know they're setting it up there. There's a lot of talk about them going to get these creatures and things like that, right? So we obviously are know that a lot of several people died trying to bring these on board, and they're not on a geology mission, they're on a biology mission. And so I think there's just something to be said there. We still don't know where they acquired all of these different organisms, whether it was like at the same place or not, but there seems to be some sort of language. Like language is a theme here, a little bit. And I know it's peppered throughout like Dark Horse comics and things of the past that we have gotten that have been built. Oh my God, I can't talk tonight. Into the universe. And so I just think that there's something to dissect here a little bit, where you have the Teocellus sort of making noises through a human body, whether it's trying to communicate with the xenomorph or make noises like animals would in the wild, whether they were like trying to warn it off, or obviously they had a little bit of a WWE throwdown in the bridge at that one scene. Um, but there's a cool element here to language, which is something that we definitely didn't get very much of, I guess, in the original films, except outside of maybe Resurrection, with Ripley being a clone and having this biological, uh, Patrick, what would you call it? Like a connection with the xenomorphs in such a way. And so. I don't really know what that means, but I did enjoy that Noah Hawley's building on this piece of it. And obviously there's Wendy sitting off in the wings right now, but being able to replicate the noise of the xenomorph. So I think we're obviously going to see more of that in possibly how these other organisms communicate. Like I'm still very intrigued to know what the tentacle-like organism is doing. How does that communicate? How do the ticks communicate? Andy, to your point with the Teocellus, like tapping on the glass, it's obviously like the most intelligent organism in that room before the xenomorph is birthed. And so I just think that that's a really cool piece of it that hasn't been explored before, and hopefully, fingers crossed, Holly writes that well to tell that piece of it. But I really think it would be a cool way if it informs us, say even in Aliens with like this sort of not hive mind sort of mentality, but just if they call to something or build upon something that we've maybe seen in an older film that could inform us or give us an idea of like, oh, cool, maybe that's what they were doing in Aliens, in a sense, right? Like we're getting this new piece of storytelling, and it is informing us in a way of how maybe they spoke with each other in the older films. I think that if it's done well, would be really clever and really intriguing. So there's my 2 cents, Patrick.
I love it. I also want to just talk about the image a little more because I'm always down for that. John Dornbos in the chat says image for president. I gotta say, I agree. I would love to see that. I think that this
Yes.
this creature is just it's just so cool,
Anything
and
for president.
it's so funny that like when Micah and I are no comment when Micah and I were watching this episode, anytime the image was on screen, we both just like look at each other. We're like, iconic. I mean, it is iconic. Like when it's crawling on top of the camera, or when it's got its little tentacles. I mean, it's just freaking amazing. I love it. It's so smart. I love that it really feels like a human in a completely inhuman vessel. Like it's so intriguing to me. And I love that we're seeing, and I had a conversation. I'm sorry, I can't remember who it was with, but it's probably somebody listening to this right now. And I apologize, we were talking about problem solving, and I was saying how in most alien media we see creatures acting heuristically, and by that I mean using like trial and error to get what they want. It's like, so cats are great examples of heuristic problem solvers, where if they can't get something off of a fridge, they'll try it 30 different times, and then gradually get higher or figure out a better way to get a vantage point, and they'll kind of figure it out, and then eventually they'll get what they want. Anybody who's has had a cat knows what I'm talking about. With the Ocellus, what I love is that it's very human and that it's not heuristic at all. It thinks ahead of time. Like it's sitting there and it's like mapping things out and it's observing the environment. So then when it does come time to do something, it already knows what's going to happen because it's already thought it through. And I love that. It's such it's such like a simple thing, but it's not a face hugger who's just trying anything it can to kind of get around a bed to jump on somebody's face. And it's not a Xeno who's just sort of like lurking in the shadows. It's something very different. It's something very human. And I think that's a big part of why it speaks to us so much, is because it feels like it acts in a very different way. Similar to what I was saying in our last episode. What I love, I think part of why the image in particular feels so correct for me is, whereas the alien, like the xenomorph XX121, is scary because it's beautiful and because it looks like us, the image is scary because it's cute and because it looks nothing like us, but it acts like us. It's this beautiful twisted mirror. And I think that's part of why it's so effective.
Can I say something super fast? Because I just remembered something that we just saw in this episode that brings my point to life. And it's the face hugger being alive in the cryo. and still implanting the embryo. I thought that was very cool, and I was not necessarily expecting that piece of it. Um, so go back to Alien when Parker's like, freeze it. Why don't they just freeze him with that thing on it? What if we have gotten the same outcome even if they did try to freeze Kane? I think that's something that's really cool to think about and to understand maybe what Hawley's maybe trying to add to this whole language part of it. Or in a way, I guess I would just love to see more little um, special moments like that.
The TSLS, which I prefer, I don't like the term image. It just makes it this dumb little toy or something. But the scariest moment in episode 5, I will say that I love, is when it twists its arms and thumps the glass to try and get her attention. Ah, I love that. It reminds me of Arrival when they're trying to warn Amy Adams' character that there's a bomb in the thing. Like there was just something like, is it warning her? Is it distracting her? You don't know. This tiny little thing scared me to death. Loved it.
Every time it's on screen, I mean, my eyes are glued to this thing. Um, Definitely intrigued by the left eye, right? As you were saying, Patrick, that was our third example of it always being on the same side. So I love where that's going to take us. In terms of world building, like I said, I actually really love the new creatures we're getting. I think it's my favorite part of the show, and I also love the characters. This one though, the creatures shined. They were the stars for me. I do have to say, I'm usually not a fan of callbacks, as if you recall my Romulus commentary about a certain quote, but I do like the subtle nods to Alien and Aliens, especially in this. Maybe not so subtle, but I liked how it wasn't just a direct, something like the chain, the dripping of the water. I do enjoy those moments. Even like the name Bronsky. I don't know if you guys were asking this, but I was like, "Where's Bronsky?" Like I just in my head, right? I loved that the 17 days reference. Um, all those little subtle things, those kind of actually, instead of taking me out, like kind of pulled me back in because some of the characters took me out so much. So that kind of tethered me back to this world. I loved the sets. Like you were saying, it really was beautiful. I loved being in that world. I just wished I felt more like I wish I was enveloped in the world with the characters too. Because again, that in Alien, when you're eating with them, when you're in those hallways with them, you're one of the crew. I didn't feel like one of the crew here. Somebody made it a point, I don't know where the direct quote is, was maybe the lack of chemistry, if you guys can find that one, maybe the lack of chemistry was an indicator that they were out in space so long, right? Like 65 years. And I don't necessarily know. I don't know if this is what you mean by this, Jamie. I don't think what you mean is like they're getting along. I just think, right? That's not what you meant. It was
No, so
right,
they just it all seemed like a performance. It didn't seem like these people
natural.
were embodying, yeah, they didn't seem natural.
Right,
Like they just met each other. It just didn't feel like these people really knew each other. Everyone was like, "Oh, hey, who are you? Who are you?" with their performance.
right. And I feel like they would have known each other. They would have known each other's quirks and oddities and total creepiness of Tang. They would have like been more accustomed to all those things by this stage in this trip and not keep calling into question and have to keep explaining things for so long. I feel like it just seems like they started a mission. And I know they're in cryo most of the time, but it still seemed like they didn't have this experience together and they didn't understand each other. And they were all like, it was like icebreakers when you're going to like like a company meeting or something, and you don't know half the people there. It just felt awkward. Like half the people didn't want to be there or participate. And that's what I think you meant, and that's what came across to me.
Just before we close, a couple more things in the chat, and then I have one more kind of thought I want to share. Dylan Smith had a lore thing that did get lost. Sorry, Dylan, but Dylan mentions that Severi announces to the crew that they're dealing with a xenomorph, which suggests that they were briefed on the species before. Don't know how I feel about that, but that's definitely a lore thing with potential complications, which maybe we'll get to later. And also Cheryl Sloboda Whited brings up on the topic of the crew, the type of people you might get to sign up for a 65-year contract is probably not getting you the best employee for the job. That, that could very much be. And, maybe they did lose a lot of the good people, and maybe what was left was kind of the skeleton crew of lifers who, didn't have a lot to lose. Who knows? It just didn't really feel like that to me. Jamie's shaking his head at everything.
Well, I'm
I
just
mean,
thinking about Alien and like, so then what about the crew of Alien? Why were they not dumb? And like, why weren't
That
none
was
of
a
those
much shorter. That was a much
That was
shorter mission.
shorter.
true, but it was shorter, but they're also they don't have the pedigree either. These people have pedigree. These are like the top of the top. Anyways, I don't want to
Unless
belabor
they're
it.
not,
yeah,
unless they're not.
we shouldn't have to make concessions though in that way to be like find
Yeah.
ways of,
Yeah,
you know what I
yes,
mean?
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. No, I agree. I'm just reading the chat. I
No,
think
oh
that's
no,
a
yeah.
valid point.
How
All
dare you, Patrick?
It's a valid point though.
It's worth
Unbelievable.
thinking about. No,
Yeah.
I love when people point things out like that because it is another
Yeah,
way to look at it,
It's
And I don't know if Cheryl necessarily is saying that they, believe that. I just think it's one way to look at it, which is
yeah.
interesting.
totally.
My an issue that I have with this episode is the fact that like we ultimately have the person who actually did this was this random ass Petrovich guy. So like the one interesting thing that could have been a thrust for this episode, which is this like espionage thing, like that could have been really exciting, ended up not even mattering because like the person who was responsible for it wasn't any of the people that we met yet. Like we see him in the first episode for like a second, but like nobody is like thinking, "Oh, could it be you? Could it be me? Could it be you?" Whereas like, one of the things that works really well with stories like this, right, is if there is tension because it could be one of the people in the room. I mean, we have a lot of references and people have pointed this out in the chat to The Thing, and that's part of why The Thing works so well is you're not really sure like who actually is. And I just think it's such a missed narrative opportunity. Like it could have been so fun to have that and to have it actually have been somebody very unexpected that you were actually like Clem, for example, right? Like I think that would have been a great choice because he seems so innocuous. He's kind of innocent, he's hanging out with Morrow. And like, what if Clem had been the one that actually had sabotaged and Morrow finds it out and turns around and Clem has a gun on him? I mean, like that would have been a better choice, I think, right? Like just in a very simple way, that would have been more interesting,
Yeah.
as opposed to this person who just shows up out of nowhere like a Deus Ex Machina, and you're like, oh, I guess it was this guy that we have no relationship with. Okay, and also just the fact that a lot of the crew apparently dies still in cryo, and this is something where the first time I saw it, I wasn't sure if that was true or not, and then I've gone back and watched, and like it's definitely true that just some of them don't wake up from it. So when Morrow was telling Mother that like the crew's dead, like there's some of them are still just in their cryopods, but it's almost if and again like in an episode of something where things are working well, none of us care about this. Like it's fine. But where there's all these other things not quite lining up, where I start thinking to myself like, well, what about like the four people that we saw in the beginning and then never saw again? And there's no closure. Like we don't have any like final shots, of the cryo chamber. Just so it feels like Hawley like remembered that there were more crew members. Obviously he did. No, Hawley's a genius. He's a brilliant guy with a ton of experience. He's got 30 something years of, high level work doing television. He knows what he's doing. But I don't like that this episode puts me in a place where I'm like, does he? It's a weird feeling because the rest of the show, I never, the rest of the show, I'm just like on the edge of my seat. And this one, I'm backing away from the television, not for
I
good
want to.
reasons.
I know we're closing. I think, yeah, when you start have to make concessions, and I know we have the prequels, which are, can be hot button issues for us to discuss as films or whatever, and everyone has the ways that they come at it. Some people love Covenant, some people love Prometheus, whatever. Um, but what has always been difficult for me when I've discussed those films is that when people start to make concessions for the characters acting the way that they did. We don't have to do that for any of the other films. We don't have to do that for any Alien. Even I think in some ways, Alien Resurrection, you don't have to really make concessions as to why they're doing what they're doing. We kind of get it. When you have to start explaining these things away, that's a problem. And I know Andie and I have talked about this a lot, but like when you lose the character, you lose your audience. When your characters aren't believable, the audience doesn't believe them. And I believe in this show, and I believe, and Wendy and everyone live on in me, like I think about them as characters. And these characters, I just was like, oh, take out the garbage. I'm done, and it's unfortunate. And I'm sure to a point you were making, Patrick, this was like their Alien movie that they were making. But I also understand that success is a very dangerous thing. When people are successful in the industry or in general, them hearing criticism or critique is even harder. Because everything that they do, they're worshipped as gods. Oh my God, they can do no wrong. They're brilliant. They're a genius. All of these things. So then everything that they turn in, people are like, "Oh my God, this is an awesome script." When in fact, that's not always the case. When in fact, I think you need to check yourself even more as a creative person as you go along, so you don't get lost in the mythology of your own hype. There's interesting parallels there with Boy Cavalier as well. I mean, he was lost in his own mythology, and I'm not, so I feel like episode 5 really loses itself. I think the script just needed a second pass from someone different. But
You know what I have to say though, just as we close, it's funny. My phone has been ringing off the hook this whole time with people saying they loved it. So it truly is. Everybody sees different things in this, and those people have absolutely all the right in the world to feel the way that they do about it as well, because it's for all of us. Stay tuned. After this, we're going to go to an interview that we did with Babu Sise, who played Morrow, of course. And then we also have another guest, which is Richo Morjani, who was just delightful to talk to. She plays Zaveri in this, and they had a lot of really cool things to say. You'll be hearing from Morrow later in the season as well, but stay tuned because you're about to hear them right after this. Thank you, everybody, so much.
Thank you.
thank you guys.
Thanks,
See you next
everybody.
week.